time has been set aside for as a hearing for the emergency response plan. And even though Joe and Connie are the only ones here, I think Roger has an overview kind of to
Sure.
give everybody. So
yes, I'll provide you an overview and maybe answer any questions about the process. Jeff was involved closely on the district safety team as well, so between the two of us we can answer any questions. But just to review, I'll get to our normal process in a second, but we did back in September hold a community forum after we had the incident with the weapon, and some of our board members did attend, and afterwards we had a board meeting in which we discussed some key questions that the board thought came out of that forum that we had hoped in the normal process to be able to respond to. So some of those key questions, again, just to refresh your memory, were upon discovery of a weapon in school, should we consult with multiple law enforcement agencies to determine safe and prudent additional steps, including decisions about whether or not to enter into a hold-in place or other emergency responses? Should we consult with multiple law enforcement agencies or rely on our one? The next question was, what are the conditions under which a hold-in place, a shelter-in-place, or a lockdown are called for or are not called for? To be a little bit more clear about that. And then, should we make more frequent use of the crisis teams, including when we are responding or recommending next steps and providing information appropriately, rapid and thorough information. So those are sort of the questions that came up. We took those along with our usual expectations to the district safety team. It was a fairly representative group of people.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
And we met as a district safety team. We raised these questions and others, and then we adjourned. Schools went and worked on some of the details of changes that they wanted to make in their plans based on some of our discussions and based, of course, on normal changes that they make. In the interim, and you might remember, we talked a lot about consulting with the New York State Police. Our state police liaison, you may remember, was called to respond to the hurricanes in the Virgin Islands. So we, instead of him being a part of our team meeting, he was able to come at a separate time and meet privately with me and with Dana Wood. And so we had, an hour-long meeting or so in which we reviewed the situation and reviewed these questions and tried to flesh some of these things out. Some of the issues that we discussed were our response to the situation back in September, and we talked a lot about this sometimes give and take between very clear steps and the judgment and experience involved, and then we spoke about that specifically in terms of this incident, and it was really very interesting. Our liaison, Sergeant Chad Niles, what he said to me was this. He said, it's true that your principal, the steps that your principal took put him in at a higher risk than we would normally like. He said, but I'm kind of boiling this conversation down. But had he not done that and made the call for, say, a lockdown or a shelter in place, he said then students would have been at a higher risk because of the situation of not having, we talked about this, not knowing where and what the situations were and having many students in a room when maybe the tension is getting higher. So we talked about this trade-off between risk to the principal versus risk to the students. And in the end, while he's one of those people who doesn't like to give 100% black and white answers, because he's the one that recognizes that every situation is different. He constantly will say that to me. Every situation is different. But he said it was a valid trade-off. He said in any one given situation, you might do something different. And so he said, given the circumstances, this made sense. We talked about that in the district safety team also. We also went through some of the questions, and then some of the changes we made to the plan are a reflection of those questions. So if I might just go right to the district safety plan and go to near the end into the appendices, what we decided to do is so that people could refer directly to any changes we made, or you want to see lessons learned or responses to new insights or information. We put these in appendices. So appendix 7, the additional considerations for the district plan, were really a reflection of the questions and then the conversations with our liaison. So I'm just going to go to, I know you probably had a chance to read this at this point, but just to the 4 or 5 additional considerations. First one, and he was very clear about this, he said, locking down is only to be used when a violent incident is in progress. I quoted him on that one. Locking down is only to be used when a violent incident is in progress. So he said, if school officials believe the situation will benefit from limiting student movement even when no violent incident is in progress in schools, you might want to consider a shelter in place or a hold in place or a lockout. But the lockdown you really reserve for the imminent danger. And then we talked about at what point, what are hold in places and shelter in places best used, what situations are they best used for? And that's really number 2. When making a determination about the presence of a threat, school officials may wish to consider implementing a hold in place. But we talked about purpose and reason for that hold in place. So hold in place is most appropriate when you're conducting locker searches or awaiting a K-9 unit to do a search, so like weapons or drugs or those kinds of things. So he said that's really the most appropriate use for it. He said there could be other uses for it, but those are the kinds of things that you want to use it for. Number 3, when addressing situations involving weapons or other threats to student and staff safety, school officials should contact the local police first and consult other agencies in consultation with the local police. Our consultation with the state police was really clear about this. This was true regardless of who we spoke to at the state police. And we said, should we have gone to you? And they said, no, you consult with the local law enforcement agency. We know them, we trust them. If they say they need to reach out to us, then they'll reach out to us. If they don't, then you don't have to. Again, that was probably one of the most clear answers I did get from them. Number 4, school officials should consider calling on the crisis team during immediately following any threatening or dangerous situations for the purpose of recommending next steps and distributing information with appropriate accuracy and speed. This is something we've taken very seriously, and you'll see it in both the elementary school plan as well as middle and high school plan. Middle and high schools always had a very, I think, strong crisis response team, but what this says is you need to use it when the situation calls for it, and probably more frequently than we're using it now. The elementary school really hasn't had as much experience with the crisis response, so they really fleshed it out. So you'll see in their school plan fairly lengthy draft or redraft of what their crisis response team does and should do. And so I think this process was really helpful for them in really looking at that crisis response team and figuring out who's there, what are they supposed to do, and how are they supposed to respond in these different circumstances. So it's really helpful for that. I think that number 4 is really key in terms of one of the additional considerations that came out of all this process. The last one was really just prevention, and that is making sure that we're informing families up front that these are things we're paying attention to. And the elementary school, you'll see in their plan, did that a little bit differently, but this is kind of a standard set of it's a standard piece of information, risk factors and protective factors. It's something that's a part of the SAFE legislation, the SAFE training that every faculty member undergoes when they're earning their license. So this would be a way of making sure that we're sharing this information or this kind of information with families, hopefully on an annual basis. So we had that consultation. We revised the district plan. We revised the team plans, and then we came back in November. We really kind of reviewed the changes. I think in general people were satisfied And you might want to comment on that, Jeff?
Yeah, I was,
That's the
and
case.
I was quite impressed with, although they did it a little bit differently, both the middle high school and the elementary school had kind of like almost, the high school had a matrix on 20, what to do. Like, here's a set of, things that could happen, here's how to react. So kind of a checklist. And the elementary school had more of a flip chart, both of which I thought were really well done, and I mean, very quickly to get the information in people's hands. People who weren't dealing with it on a daily basis. I think that was one of the things that I walked away with. I thought that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, and those also you'll see in the school emergency response plans too. And that's really the first time I think we've seen those in those plans. We've had that information available, but it hasn't been directly connected to the school plan. So that's also, I think, a benefit of this whole process. So that's it. Do you have any questions or comments about this?
I have a question on if the question got answered about the holding place with the canine searches, about the bags being placed in the hall. Did that get addressed at all? Because that came up in the conversation, like if the students are in the classroom, but then there's going to be a search of the building, but they have stuff in the classroom. Can the and the dogs aren't able to enter the classroom? Are things able to be placed in the hallway for when the search is being done?
It's actually not a common thing. I don't think we really came to any kind of specific consensus on that, but we did talk about how the dog search, can go into rooms, but often will stay away from the people. I know what you're saying, that get the baggage out into the hallway and like, but we really didn't come up with any kind of clear, yes, that's something we would always do, putting the bags in the hallway.
Because I thought it was said that the dogs would not be allowed in any classrooms.
Right. The dogs don't go in unless there's, I think they can go in if there's no kids there.
Right.
But the dogs don't generally go where the people are. We clear the people out from where the dogs are, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then on the number 4, because it was brought up about the crisis team, and calling the crisis team doesn't mean that every step is taken. And specifically in the report talks about threatening or dangerous, so I'm just wondering why it says should consider instead of saying that it's going to happen.
So the reason is for the very reason that Sergeant Niles has really clearly always said that every situation is different and you have to respond appropriately. What we're trying to say here is that we're going to make more frequent use of the crisis team. But we're not saying 100% on this particular situation that we would every particular kind of discipline referral, or we're not laying out an absolute. What we're doing is we're providing ourselves with greater guidance here.
And then the appendix with the Centers for Disease Control. So this is criteria that teachers have when they go through training. This exact same, because our students aren't tested. Do you have IQs on any of our students?
We have what?
IQs on the students. Are our students tested?
You're looking at bullet 5.
Yeah.
We don't have. Well, actually, we do. I mean, depending on we don't have. That's not something that we test every kid on. It's not group testing. We don't do group IQ testing. What this is, so I taught this class, so I'm pretty familiar with it, right? So this is based on the research of working with people, in this case students, and to recognize what kinds of factors make them a risk and what kind of factors help alleviate the risks in their lives. So the individual risk factors are, this is a generalist. Again, this is not a checklist. This is not every, if you have 8 of these, you're a risk for violence. But these are ways to identify the kind of kids or people who might pose a risk. Should should the world turn a certain way and their situations change in a certain way. True with their families also. and the peer factors and the community factors, right? What kind of communities do they live in? You know, what's the nature of the neighborhood? What's the level of poverty? All these kinds of factors. So no, we don't have information on all those things. This is in general the kinds of conditions that can more likely lead to kids doing the wrong thing, right? So, but no, we don't have. This is not like a checklist of absolute information that we have. We might have some of this information on people. We might have a lot more information if we're paying attention to our kids in our community, though.
But is this list from? I mean, is this similar? Is that what teachers have when they go through training from?
Right. So, for example, I taught this class a couple of times, the safety class based on the safe legislation, and so we teach what the risk factors are, and we teach recognizing that these are risk factors, and maybe in some depth of what they might mean if people aren't clear about that. But also the protective factors, and again, you know, recognizing that you may have a kid who's struggling in one way, but has, for example, the first bullet, a high level of connectedness to the family or adults outside the family, or adults outside the family. Those connections strengthen their ability to act or be in any kind of act in some kind of dangerous way or misguided way. So yeah.
So I'm just. Are these similar bullet points in the safe legislation, or are these bullet points
part of
from
the course.
somewhere else?
This would be an example. So this is from the Centers of Disease Control, right? Which provides reference material to help educate people on this particular issue. You know, what are the conditions under which people might make wrong, misguided decisions or find themselves in a dangerous circumstance. As far as are these in the law? I don't know if they're in the law. I know that they're in the course that teachers take to become licensed.
That's
Yes.
what I was wondering if these say
And
that.
so it's in, you find it in the teaching materials, you find it in the exam that they take as a part of things. Yeah.
You find it in drug prevention programs too. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty widespread.
Yeah, it just lists stuff that we don't have access to.
Roger?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how this will fit in with this, but when the school is in a hold in place or shelter in place,
Mm-hmm.
and a student shows up because they were late
Yeah.
and can't get in the building, what happens?
So not getting in the building would be a lockout. Right.
Okay,
So a lockout, we do have, if you were look, for example, in middle and high school, you would see some specific examples of where they go, depending on where they are. And if you go to the school emergency response line for the middle and high school, you would see that like a group of students who might be in the front yard would go into the tunnel. Right,
Okay.
that's one of those places that's specifically listed. So we've identified a few places, but we don't have everything identified. So in some cases, we would have to respond based on the circumstance.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with this one under at the beginning, under general considerations in planning, because this is the one that's supposed to be approved tonight, right?
Yes.
So under D, plan review and public comment, the
What page is that?
Where are you?
beginning,
Like at the top of the document?
my iPad says it's page 4.
Okay. Mhm.
Wait, it might be on page, yeah, no, it's still page
D,
4.
yep.
D,
Mhm.
1, where the blank is, at the bottom of that paragraph, it says January 2016. That was,
Yeah.
that was one of the dates.
That was one of the questions you had.
Yeah,
And so, and one of the comments I made, Karen, because forward to Karen, because she'll end up doing this, is what Karen does when we approve this, she goes back in and revises all the dates. So we didn't change, you're right, we didn't change those because we don't know what the dates are. So, we'll do that once we approve it tonight or at a later meeting.
Yeah, but this would have been approved last year.
So this is the plan we're going to approve for the future,
Right,
right?
but we
So-
would have had to approve this, don't we have to approve this plan every year?
So we did.
So that should have been set.
So that was last year's
Right.
approval date.
It wasn't though. It would have been January 2017. That was the date.
You're right.
So I just, if we're gonna, and then we'll
Sure.
shift it. That was one of, I think, let's get out of this to see what the little comment thing is. 1 second, there's just something else. No, the other things I have are in the other parts down lower in the meeting, so.
Anything else? Any other questions, comments?
Consent agenda, we move on to, there was a request to remove one item, the extra duty stipend and approval, duty and stipend approval. So what's left is the 5.01 minutes, 7.001 certification of lead evaluators, 7.02 budget calendar approval, 7.03 policy second read and adoption, 7.07 the donation acceptance, and 7.08 special education. Anybody
So one of them got removed, so I removed the bus resolution, so the last two are now 7.06 and 7.07.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to remove the donation acceptance.
Any others? Then is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
Yes.
Thanks, Jeff. Is there a second?
A
Yeah.
second.
Thank you, Patty. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries 6-4-0. For the good of the cause, and this is a time for public participation on school-related matters. Any person wishing to address the board, now is your chance. Please state your name and a brief description of the topic to be discussed, and also provide the same information on the sheet provided in the back of the room. Any comments? No? Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming. We'll move on to, for the good, our reports to the board. So we have another presentation from Roger.
Well, it's not just me. Connie Handmaker is here, our high school counselor, and Connie's going to step in and speak a bit when we get to that point about our efforts to increase access to college level coursework. So, but first, I have a presentation about the opportunity gap in general. So when so on the board goals for the year, the board asked me to provide a report on our opportunity gap reduction plan. And that's what we're going to do tonight. And you've got that plan on board docs. But I thought in addition, this would be a good opportunity, sorry, I'll try to use that word 100 million times tonight. But this would be a chance for us to review what do we mean by the opportunity gap, and how then, because until you understand it, it's hard to know how to respond. It's also hard to know what a significant challenge is, frankly. So I thought I would go through some of that. Okay, there we go, perfect. Thought we would go through some of that, and then I want you to feel free to ask questions or make any points of clarification, because if you have a chance, you may have already been reviewing this PowerPoint or the plan that we have. So is that going to be good enough? So I'm going to talk about two kinds of gaps, the achievement gap and the opportunity gap. Closely linked, but not necessarily the same thing. The achievement gap is something which is fairly commonly known in education circles. And it's most widely known when we're talking about the gap between majority children and minority children, Black and Latino children typically. Yeah, sorry. So this graph right here represents the classic achievement gap graph between white children at the top and Black and Latino children in the blue and black at the bottom. The gap is a gap in test scores. Over the course of the last 40, 50 years, we've seen somewhat of a narrowing of the gap, but then kind of a leveling off and a gap that's been consistent over time. It's probably the most commonly cited issue in American education, the achievement gap between Black and Latino.
I looked at this earlier and I couldn't answer this question, but so the scale on this thing, obviously you're obvious, but the scale on the y-axis, what is it?
So these are NAEP scores, and NAEP is the national exam that's given to students nationwide. It's a select process. It's not every student takes it, and so it's a standard score. You might be familiar with the SAT standard score from 200 to 800.
Yeah.
This is the standard score that the NAEP uses.
So if you do the calculation, then the 293 is like a 95%, and 264 is a 85%, roughly. Yeah. If you did it on a percentile.
If you did, but it isn't done that way. It isn't done right. I'm sorry. Yes, a percentile basis, but not a percentage basis.
Yeah.
Right. So if the
No, I
best
mean,
score only received 50%,
yeah,
then that would be the 99th percentile.
that's what you're measuring, the percentile.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. Okay, thanks.
So not as commonly known is the gap that exists between children from poorer families and wealthier families, the income achievement gap. Some of this research is pretty recent. This graph comes from 2011 research, widely cited now, but pretty radical, representing not a stable gap between rich and poor, but a widening gap. And so what we see is that over the course of the last, again, 60, 70 years, not only do we see a widening of the gap for kids at the top and kids at the bottom, but also kids in the middle and kids at the top. So you can see even this widening. So a middle-class kid and a kid from an upper middle-class family could be doing distinctively different. This is all based on averages over time, but the correlations are pretty powerful. And so powerful that we've been able to identify that the black-white gap has, over time, since, again, the 50s, 60s, 70s, been reduced and stabilized, but this income gap seems to be increasing. So it's a very, very powerful factor in American education. We talk about why are test scores not as good as we want them to be. Why are some of our kids going to college and not others? Again, a lot of this is reflected in this income gap. Here in Lake Placid, we don't have much of a gap between kids who are racially different or ethnically different. But we do have a gap in income. So at the local level, we see these same trends, right? This is just one of many, many tests that I can pull out. 7th grade math scores in 2013 and 2014. Kids who are not economically disadvantaged and kids who are economically disadvantaged. That's how that one turned out, right? Again, this is just one sampling of many. It's also true with some of the big exams that you see out there. I just mentioned SATs. This is a correlation for SAT scores based on income. So the lowest income kids on the left, the highest income families on the right, and you can see what happens to scores. It's a very strong correlation where test scores tend to go up when family income goes up. Right? These are national numbers. This is actually produced by the College Board itself. But while that's national, you don't have to look very hard to find it here in Lake Placid also. So this is SAT participation by income in Lake Placid just the last two school years. right, graduating classes, 2016 and 2017. So the blue bar representing our students who are on free reduced lunch. Those students take the SAT at a far lower percentage than our students who are not on free reduced lunch. You can kind of see it's about twice the percentage in last year's graduating class between one group and the other. And I also have numbers on scores, and the scores were different too. I just wasn't able to pull all this together in time. So you see it in scores, you see it in participation. If you're wondering, well, how bad is this in Lake Placid? Here is how our free reduced lunch numbers are changing over time. The blue line is Lake Placid, the percentage of students in Lake Placid who qualify for free reduced lunch since 2008, 2009. It was 14% back in 2008-9. 9 or 10 years later, it's 43 to 44%. And so that's a pretty steep climb, that blue line. The green line is national statistics. And so we did see back in 2012-13, nationally, the percentage of students climbed just over 50%. And so you can see that line going up gradually and maybe leveling off. Hard to know what the last 2 years were because we don't have that data. We do have it for Lake Placid, but not for the national figures. But I find that to be a scary graph, right? Because you don't have to, think too hard to wonder what 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 7 years from now it's going to look like.
Eligibility remain constant.
Yeah, matter of fact, it's the same,
More strict.
right? It's 130% of poverty qualified for free lunch, 180% of poverty qualified for reduced. And that poverty figure is pretty consistently used. It's not the same as what you may have been hearing if you've been watching some of the more recent news come out of the region, the ALICE numbers. Those are really higher income levels. This is a very standard reflection of poverty or a percentage of poverty. And I will correct one thing. And I've mentioned this a couple of times to the board before. Qualification has changed over the last 10 years, and that you're more able to qualify without having to do the form by virtue of having your family qualified already for food stamps or for Medicaid. We call it direct certification. So direct certification has become a more common way of qualifying. So we have this achievement gap versus the opportunity gap. What's the difference? Well, like I said, they're very closely related, but the achievement gap is really the difference in outcomes. But the opportunity gap is really, well, how do we get there? Like, why is that the case? Right? And so that's what we've really been talking about the last few years in the school district. So I just thought I would elaborate on that. And I'll try and go kind of quick because there's a lot here, obviously. There was a whole month between board meetings, so I actually picked up this book and read it and borrowed a lot of the graphs. A lot of the graphs that I've got in here are from this and a couple of other books. But essentially, this opportunity gap, why this is happening, is a reflection of lots of different aspects of children's lives. One is their exposure to language. The children who are from poorer families tend to be exposed to a lot less language back at the 6-month, 12-month, 18-month level. And that research is showing us, really powerful research lately, is making a difference in how kids do later in life. So it's exposure to language. It's the type of language, whether kids are receiving encouraging or discouraging feedback in their interactions with adults. You can see, again, a gap between professional, working class, and welfare children in these studies. You can see it from families who eat dinner together, right? And I go home and think, oh my God, I missed dinner with my kids tonight. So, and I think about this, right? You can see how the bottom line, fewer and fewer families of low income are having dinner together than they used to. It's also gone down, declined for families of higher income or higher education, but also leveling off. And then, so you see it in a whole number of different areas, and I'll just try to go quickly. Social networks. Who do they know? Right? Sometimes we call this social capital. Higher income versus lower income. Informal mentors. Who is having an impact on kids? again, different for higher income versus lower income. Spending on children, right? Are families spending more? Well, it's true at the top decile of income. Yes, more and more expending expenses on children. Whereas at the lower income, you can see flat or decreasing. In terms of what types of spending, and what you see is access to all kinds of cultural experience and intellectual experience. So you can see families in the 5th quintile, again, the higher income, spending a lot more on books and magazines, computers, sports, trips. That big line is trips, and electronics. And this one makes me think about that Washington, D.C. trip. It makes me feel very good about that Washington, D.C. trip, because all of our kids get on that. But that's one trip. You can see what a difference it makes for families overall. Financial worries, right? So we talk about how does income really impact kids at home? Why does it make a difference? Well, we talk about the stress that families are under, and the financial worries that lead to stress at home. Again, far different for children from lower income than higher income families. Neighborhoods. Who's influencing them? Is there fear in their neighborhood? Again, trust is very low for the lowest income families and much higher for the wealthy families. This issue, which Connie's going to get to in a second, access to, this is AP classes. Schools that have far lower free reduced lunch tend to offer more AP courses versus those with high free reduced lunch numbers. That's also true with extracurriculars. You know, we talk a lot about extracurricular participation. That gap is also powerful for children in terms of, again, lowest versus highest income. Access to sports being one of those. Even sports, you see a distinction. And then I'll linger on this one. I think this is a pretty powerful one. There's a gap in college enrollment and completion. Old numbers, so you have to revise the numbers. But the 2 bars on the left, graduated from high school in 2004. So you can see that there's a gap in graduation rate. It's not as significant as the later gaps, though. So the lighter bar being the lower income families, or in this case graduates, versus the higher income. But that second one applied to college. Now we start to see that gap increase a little bit. Still much closer than the later ones. Then enrollment in college, all of a sudden we're talking about twice the percentage of students with higher income versus lower income enrolling in college. And then clearly the most dramatic one is completion. And when you talk about, we talk a lot about where kids go to college, but we don't talk as much about college completion. Some of our intervention programs do, however, Upward Bound and College for Every Student spend a lot of time focusing on college completion. And some of them, Upward Bound in particular, actually follow students through, but they only work with a small percentage. So in terms of, okay, so that's a pretty big problem. It is a very big problem. I would say it's probably one of the most significant problems in American education today. What do we do about it, right? And I think it's important to recognize that there are 2 or more ways to address it. Not all of it involves the school, right? Since a lot of this is family-based, community-based, society-based, you don't fix everything in schools. So there are external, my goodness, what is that bug? There are some external solutions that can be worked on here, but that's something that generally happens outside of school. So this is through public policy, this is through local community actions, this is through families and individuals making decisions about their lives. Right? All those things don't necessarily involve schools. But there are some internal things we can do, and I believe that we are doing to try and make a difference. And you can do those at the board level with making decisions about budgets. You can do it at the administrative level on a daily basis. You can do it at the teacher level and the TA level and many other levels. So that's what we're going to talk about with this plan. And again, the plan is long, and I won't go through it in great detail. We will linger on a few things. Connie will linger on the access to college level courses and some other, and then maybe a couple of other pieces to it. So the external ideas, again, here's a list that if you want to go out and advocate for, you might work on of areas outside of school you might work on. But In terms of here in Lake Placid, here's a short list of some of the things that you'll find on our more detailed list. UPK4, some of the strongest research out there is that high quality, universal pre-K makes a significant difference in the lives of kids and in communities, not just in the immediate moment, not just in test scores in school, but over the long term of their lives. We've had some research that has tracked kids for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Very, very powerful. Birth to 3 collaboration. You know that we've got our Birth to 3 Alliance in the region. I'm our liaison to that. We do try and work closely to try and figure out ways to work on school readiness so that when children come to school, they can be more ready. That's a huge issue, and I'm not going to tell you that BT3 has resolved all of that, but that's what they're working on. Decreasing barriers to AP and college classes, what Connie's going to talk about in a minute. Increased access to sports and extracurricular. All these are things, efforts that we've been making. Increased inclusion in special ed. Last meeting, Sarah Allen was here to talk about the percentage of students, 80% in general ed classes or higher. And I said something like, you're going to see that in the opportunity gap plan too. Inclusion in special ed is an important piece of this. Small class sizes makes a difference, most significantly for kids from lower income. Support for needy students, talking about things like the backpack program, the food pantry, the Ed Op Fund, finding different ways to create new and innovative experiences for kids that can help all kids and open up those opportunities for them. Poverty awareness, we did a very powerful poverty simulation last year with all the faculty. We're going to expand that to try and include board members, community members later on this year, so we'll see how that goes. Poverty and trauma responses at the school and teacher level. That's the bulk of the plan that I gave to you on board docs, because what we've done is we've taken it from here's some things that we believe the district we should be doing to what do teachers and teaching assistants and principals, what are the ideas that they can then implement on a daily basis. And so we've been working hard on that. Connie is on one of those teams. She's on the middle and high school team. We have an elementary team. They've been getting together, I think maybe 2-3 times so far since this year, creating a very detailed, very extensive, very, I think in many ways, visionary set of responses. And that's in there for you too, or at least I gave you the short version. So if it's long, I apologize, but it's a lot longer than the original one. And then our summer programs, there, yes, we do have summer school, but we're trying to find ways to add in enrichment programs. We do some things in the elementary school to enrich. This year we did offer lessons, music lessons for any child through summer school as a way to expand that piece of cultural experience. So in terms of, can we help? I believe the author of this book, Robert Putnam, believes that schools can help. But I think this is a powerful quote. If schools didn't cause the opportunity gap, and there's little evidence that they have, it might well be a prime place to fix it. Americans concerned about the opportunity gap must not make the all-too-common mistake of blaming schools for the problem. Instead, we should work with schools to narrow the gap. School is, after all, the kids are. And so I used a few books. This is one we have started reading 4 years ago, just in the administrative team, to help us sort of hone us in on this issue. And you're always be happy to share with you any resources that have if you're interested. So, so those are that's the presentation piece, but the plan you have in front of you, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So if we take a look at the plan, I want to give you an overview of it, and I'm going to ask Connie to report on that one piece, and I'll cover any other distinctions we need to make. But so the plan is made up of really 3 different sections. The first one, Lake Placid CSD's effort towards closing the opportunity gap. That's really changes we've made in collaboration with School District Board of Education. Right, these were some ideas which we said let's implement those at the school, in the schools, and let's carry them out. So some of these are programmatic, that kind of thing. The second page, though, LPES Poverty Trauma Initiative. This is a summary of the very specific plans that I just mentioned that is being implemented by a team of teachers, principals, others who are working to come up with very specific daily kinds of ideas that can work with kids. So you'll see that summarized in one page, a work in progress still. And then the third page, which I think goes into the fourth page, I couldn't really summarize theirs too briefly, the Middle School, High School Poverty Trauma Initiative. Again, you will see a lengthy list of ideas that they are working on, hashing out, breaking down, altering as they go, things that they can do to make a difference. So I'm gonna go back for a second and ask Connie to talk about number 9, because this was also on the board's goals, and so Connie, if you would at this point, I'm going to ask you to talk about reducing barriers to college level classes, something that we started. I don't know if it was a clean start. I think these are the kinds of things we've been doing all along, but I identified 14, 15 if you think that's
Yeah,
right.
I would say so.
Yeah.
So probably 14 to 15, we revised some of we used to have prerequisites for AP courses, and we kind of changed that language a little bit to be guidelines. So what we do is when I meet with students their freshman and sophomore year, we kind of talk about what they need to be looking to do to be successful in an AP course versus qualifying for an AP course. Because the goal is to teach them how to basically be successful, right? Not get a certain grade all the time. So we talk about that a lot. The college level courses are available to all juniors and seniors in the school. We also have the bridge courses, which are partnered with North Country Community College, and that offers 3 credits, except one course offers 4 credits. And those are also open to all juniors and seniors. Sometimes we can squeak a 16-year-old sophomore by, but North Country is pretty much blanketed it at juniors and seniors. We also offer the Model OAS class through SUNY Plattsburgh, so we have a lot of opportunity for our students. I did put together some numbers of what we have for AP and Bridge. I'm happy to hand that out and then kind of go over that. Sorry, it's on yellow. I'm used to working with kids who can't lose papers. So you can see our AP courses. Currently this school year we have 6 AP courses, but we are able to offer also AP Statistics and AP Physics. Also AP Calc when we have enough interest. Those courses are not typically have enough interested students each year, so we keep it on our roster on College Board, but we don't offer it every year. So you can see here kind of how our classes are broken out. We have had a little bit of a drop in some of the classes, but overall we have 30 students total. So you can, if you're adding up those numbers, you can see that some of our students, most of our students are enrolled in more than one AP course. AP courses, each year I get together with the teachers of the previous year, so sophomore year usually or junior year, and we go over a list of students who would make good AP students in that particular class. We talk about them, we look at how they performed in the class, then we have a discussion. Some students we will open up a 5-week probationary period for them. AP courses do have a 5-week window where students can drop without any W or WF on their transcript. So we do give them that opportunity to kind of see what it's like, see what they're going to do. We have open conversations between the student, myself, and the teacher in that 5-week probationary time. And more often than not, I would say the students usually end up working to the ability of the class and maintaining at least an 80 or higher throughout the year. And our students typically have pretty good results on their AP exams. So the teachers are doing something right. They're fantastic with the kids and working through and understanding what each student kind of needs. The AP courses, they are an extra cost. Currently this year they are $94. They usually raise $1 or $2 each year. Students who qualify for free and reduced lunch do have a fee waiver for those exams. So those students are able to take AP without worry of cost. And usually it is a worry for them until they realize that that qualification does get them that exam, so they'll stick to the class. Our bridge courses, this semester we have 10. Next semester we will add 3 more. But they will the Women in Literature and Statistics course will substitute the Multicultural Literature and Intro to College Algebra, so we'll still have 10 each semester, which is it's a pretty amazing opportunity for students. They're able to stay on campus. The teachers are all qualified through their own credits from their master's program. They get certified basically through North Country Community College, and the students don't have to leave campus to gain college credit. This program, in the years I've been here, has grown dramatically. We've added pre-calculus, intro to college algebra, and we were working on, still going to be working on criminal justice, and getting that opportunity to students. It's been huge, and what I find kind of exciting is parents of graduates who come back and say even students who go to out-of-state schools or outside of the SUNY CUNY system are getting enough credit to either have a semester under their belt that may not be towards their major, but it's towards their gen eds, which essentially still saves you a semester at college level prices. There is an extra cost. It's $60 per course to take these courses. Students do not have to take the bridge credit. They may take it for just high school credit. And some of those numbers that you'll see there, so we'll give an example of pre-calc. I don't really know the students in there, but 14 out of 17, so maybe one of those students just doesn't want to take it for college credit. The photography course, we have 2 sophomores in there, so they're not qualified to take it. One student is international, so he doesn't need it. So there's different reasons why not every student is enrolled for the bridge. But for the majority, you can see we have 46 out of 57 students this semester enrolled in college credit, and it's pretty awesome.
So the kids that are taking the course that aren't enrolled for bridge credit, are they still paying the $60 for
No,
the course?
they
It's just
are
the ones
not.
who for the
Correct. Yep. And all that payment, North Country handles it, and they come and register. Our students in bridge courses are also able to use North Country Community College resources, so they're able to get into the library, use those resources.
Even the kids not taking the bridge.
Not typically, but I think they are able to still get onto this, because you have to have the students get an actual username through North Country. So if you've registered, you're paying for that username to log into their system.
And does the $60 cost, does that prevent some kids from taking it for credit?
Some students, yes. A lot of students who are worried about that don't really come forward and say that. They'll just say, oh, I'm going to be looking at a different college. They're not going to take those credits. But I probably had 2 this year say the cost is an issue. Sometimes I try to, sometimes we might have some money to help, but we'll sit with the student and talk, usually the teacher and myself, and really figure out a way to do it. North Country can set up a payment plan, I believe. Our students also in our CTE programs, which is our career tech educational programs, many more of those are offering college credit through some of their certifications and programs, and that's continuing to add a little bit more each year, and they have the same thing through North Country Community College. And our New Vision programs are also college credit. We have a new gaming and coding. I believe, I don't know how many college credits that one is. 8, I'm not sure. New Vision Health is 10 college credits, and they get the same access to the North Country Community College library and resources, which is pretty great because they use it. They'll end up using that library more than they use Google, which is good. So that's been really neat to see more and more of those adding. The Cosmo program and Health Opt have college credit associated with them. We also have Model OAS, which is partnered with SUNY Plattsburgh. That has 10 students currently enrolled in it, and all of those students are actually enrolled in at least one AP as well. And you can see how these kind of overlap. A lot of our bridge students are enrolled in AP courses as well. And that gives you a little bit of it. We have 113 juniors and seniors currently this year. So you can see how many are in AP and bridge there. And I calculated out, we have about 27 students enrolled in both an AP class and a bridge course this year in their schedule. The AP Environmental Science is a double cost for students because they get the bridge credit and the AP. Our AP students through our contract do have to take the AP exam, so they do have to pay for that. SUNY Plattsburgh, I don't actually do any of the credit through that. That's all through Brendan Clotham, who runs the class. and he works with the Latin American Studies program at SUNY Plattsburgh. That one is in the $300 range, so we don't have a lot of students. I've over the years, I've kind of continued to compile a list of which colleges will take that credit, and not many do, so a lot of our students do not sign up for that credit, but they still come out of that class. It's probably one of their favorite classes, and they take it. They learn way more than they can. Other things that we've done that I didn't note on here, but it kind of came to me after, is for the past 3 years, we've offered the PSATs free to all juniors, and we are in a grant program through College Board with that. So no students have to pay a fee to take the PSATs, which is pretty awesome. The numbers have gone up every year, but we still see a gap in students taking that exam. SATs, students who qualify for free and reduced lunch do get fee waivers for SATs, so they're able to come get a number from me and they can take the SATs for free, which that number is supposed to be good for a year. And they can also, that waives their college application fees. And the College Board is also issuing this year an in-school day, so we can actually offer the SAT to our students during a school day. The cost isn't waived, unless you're free and reduced lunch or have a fee waiver, but the students would not have to physically get themselves to Northwood or Saranac Lake or Plattsburgh, or I think that's all it's locally. So they could take it during a school day with us. You know, you're thinking of maybe those students who are stressed about having to work or take a day off work or help with the family, help with younger kids. It might be a really good opportunity for us to start looking at, and I am in communication with Mr. Wood regarding that. That's brand new through the College Board this year. Also, students in our Upward Bound program, we currently have 6 students, and we're continuing to try and grow it. We will have 2 graduates of that this year, 1 graduate. And they offer amazing opportunity. The students are able to go into a college campus during the summer and take courses, and they also are able, they have fee waivers, they have help to get through the college application process, they have help throughout college, and they just have a lot of great resources to kind of help those students. Upward Bound is basically if you're a first generation of low income and not necessarily the educational support outside of school, those students that you want to get through to move on. I think I covered. Any questions about what we're offering?
What's Model OAS?
Model OAS, it's for our students, it's their government credit, but they are linked with Latin American Studies programs, so they basically are given a country, so they're, I don't know if it's competition, it's more, they go to SUNY Plattsburgh in June, the first weekend in June, and there's I don't know how many other schools from all over the area, and they go and defend their country on policies, laws, things like that, public speaking, intense research. It's a very research-based class, so students do have to be recommended or go into it knowing that it's not our blanket government course, it's a research-based course.
So Connie mentioned a lot.
Yes.
I mentioned a lot, and then I handed you a plan, a multi-page plan, which has mentioned a lot. So this is a good chance if you have questions or comments for Connie, for me, or for just in general.
Is there a way with budgeting for the district or the board to make a decision to find a way to fund the bridge and AP classes? Like we couldn't
For
pay
kids who
for
can't
a
afford it.
specific, but can we? I mean, can we single out kids, choose to pay for some and not for others? Or would it be,
I think there's an issue there.
yeah,
We probably want to look into it a little more.
We could certainly do that with the Ed Op fund.
Yeah,
Ask the Ed Op fund to set up a scholarship program.
Would the issue be because it's an individual
Yeah.
versus setting a bar that says if you
Yeah.
don't, if you don't meet, if you can't.
Yeah,
Need
I'm
a
not saying it
certain-
wouldn't be, that would
Because
be.
I wrote that down too. I think that's a really would be a great thing. if it's
but what
possible.
would be, I mean, I guess maybe even just to look at what the amounts would be if it was just to be covered with the
Mhm.
numbers. We don't have huge numbers,
For everybody.
just to cover it.
Yeah.
Maybe for everybody, then it would be.
Right, and then we could just send a note out to people who feel like they can afford it. If they feel like they can afford it, that they can contribute to the education fund.
Would that be
In
including
the
AP
spirit
as
of
well? You say AP as well?
Yeah.
Everything.
Everything, yeah, everything that's an extra cost.
Yeah. I mean, I
Because
think
it comes up, and if they're not, especially for the students that are in the middle, that aren't
Exactly,
free and
yeah.
reduced, but yet
Right.
can, and I've talked with families who, you know, the kids are like, they, all of a sudden, they're kind of caught by surprise,
Mhm.
and then they come home and they're having to tell, well, I need a check for $60, and I need a check for
Right.
this, and, I just wondered if that was eliminated, if then they could just
No, I
participate.
would agree with that because the bills are due around the same time. And you think about our AP students who are the middle, they're not qualifying for assistance and they're in 2 to 3 AP classes.
It can really add up.
That's a heavy check for a parent to write at the end of November.
Yeah, when the
Um,
holidays are starting up.
Right.
So, I don't know, if we could look into it, especially with some of the other
That might help with numbers too, if people
Things that
know
we-
it's available.
that we find.
Yeah, I
money
mean, we do
for,
have some
right?
students drop in the summer. I don't know if sometimes because we send a letter home at the end of summer about AP courses and the cost. I don't know if that, somebody, those conversations don't usually happen, but it may open it up for some students. So,
What if the school was all reduced lunch? Would that change that matrix?
Yeah, I mean, if our students would qualify. You mean, if every student qualified for free or reduced lunch?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they would then qualify. Most of these waivers are
Yeah.
based on free or reduced lunch
But
qualifications.
if
But would they
if
have
we
to-
choose, do you mean that thing where we could
Yeah.
choose to just cover lunch? That thing, or?
Well-
Even if people, there is a program that if we reach a certain number with kids that are economically disadvantaged, then we can offer free
Lunch to the whole
everybody.
school?
That wouldn't, but there would, not everybody would get their free lunch, but they wouldn't meet the criteria for
Okay.
qualifying
Okay.
for it.
It's a good question.
So there's they would still have to fill out basically the form for the free reduced lunch to see if they qualify.
For the other waivers.
Unless
For
we
the other
covered it all,
waivers.
unless we covered all of the charges, all of the students.
That's the obvious solution when you do it.
With those receiving waivers, do we get reimbursed from the state for that or no?
You know, that works. It's changed since I did it.
no.
So, because that would enter into it, we'd still want to get reimbursed for those students that we could get reimbursed for.
Right.
For the free and reduced
Right.
lunch, yeah.
Well, and for,
You say if we covered everybody, you still
wanna
want to
take
be
advantage
reimbursed.
of
Where we
right.
funds that
get
Correct.
the money back.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
I agree with that.
And the College Board fee waivers, I just want to clarify, it's not just from free and reduced, there's a whole list of qualifications I can choose from. So if you gave free and reduced lunch to all students, they would still have to qualify. If there's other points you can choose, so those students still receive their fee waivers for SAT, college applications, things like that.
Well, that's something we can look at as a board, right? Jen? I think that's would be a really good thing to be doing.
Sure. Any other questions or comments for Connie or me or anybody?
No, so the junior,
Yes.
the access to the classes, then if they're a junior or a senior, they can pick from the full menu.
Yes.
There aren't ones that are specifically for seniors, or it just depends on how it works into the schedule.
Yeah.
Okay,
Exactly. Sophomores, if they're gonna turn 16 in January, sometimes North Country will let us do a second semester, but they're trying to get to just the junior, senior language.
and because photography used to be offered sophomore year.
Yes, so that's phased out. I only pretty much offer it to juniors
Now
and
that's
seniors
junior,
because
seniors.
I don't want them to feel they can't repeat it, so if
Yeah.
they're gonna get college credit for it, I'd rather they wait until they're junior, so.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Connie, thanks for being here. Really
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Yep, safe travels.
I would stay, but
Yeah,
that's
no,
what my
be
daughter
careful.
did.
Going home.
I will, thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thanks,
Good
Connie.
night.
Take care.
Yeah, no, we got like so small that night. I was
It's a
out
full
at
moon,
about
everybody's
midnight.
crazy,
That was great.
saying.
Yeah. That goes without saying.
Thank you, Roger.
Thanks. Really good.
In the, I had one question in the, it's not on any of these points, but the trip, there's a trip being planned by the language.
Mhm.
Um,
I wouldn't put it in this category because it's a cost trip.
right,
Yeah.
but how does that,
It's a great opportunity, but
but is it, I mean, is that being like sanctioned through the school, or is it being done by an individual that's charging for the, like,
we're
is the
doing it the
school?
way we've done other trips where there's a cost involved.
So
And
there's
so
other-
there's a lot of fundraising going on to reduce the cost, but we can't get it down to zero. We haven't been able to.
So, okay,
Yeah.
but it's, so it's a trip through the school that only those that can afford it are able to
Well, it's kind
go.
of an extracurricular trip because it's not a requirement for the class. It's not specific to any one class, it's part of a club, travel club.
Where are they going? I know they talked about Cuba.
So that's what we're working on still.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was a question that I can ask you when we get down to the, is who is doing it, because there's no person listed under travel club on the
Right, 'cause it's not an
stipends.
official club, right, Leonard? Is that what?
It just
That
seems
is
to be a
correct,
little bit,
Yes.
We
um,
run it through, student council.
Yeah, we run it through the student council, the travel club association.
yeah, I don't know. Okay, I just wondered, we're not signing off on it though, it's like they're doing it, we don't have to sign, the board sign off on it?
No.
They're just doing it, so, okay.
I signed off on it.
And did this come from the students? Did the students
What's that,
express
travel
the
club?
trip? Yeah, the idea that they wanted to go someplace.
Oh, yeah.
That all came
Oh,
from
yeah,
them.
yeah.
That was- And that's what tends to happen with these kind of trips. Kids decide they really like to go someplace and they find somebody that'll oversee it and.
But school funds aren't going towards it,
No,
okay,
it's all
and we don't have
fundraising.
to approve it,
No.
okay. That's,
Any other questions?
mm-mm.
Okay, then let's move on to the budget status report.
Okay,
Lenny, can you go through that?
Yep.
this is the budget status report through October. Revenues, we'll cover that first. From property taxes, our year-to-date revenues through October are $14,825,892. Our other tax items are $7,223. Charges for services, $20,601. Use of money, $2,276. Miscellaneous revenue was $41,517. Our state aid through October was $182,653 for a total. Year-to-date revenue through October was $15,080,162. If you look at the right-hand side of that worksheet there, it's just about exactly the same amount of percentage collected this year as we did last year. 0.02% difference. So, any questions on the revenue side? So expenditures, in salaries, $1,846,800. Employee benefits is $1,731,519. Our contractual expenses and BOCES expenses are $722,384. Materials and supplies is $151,279. Equipment was $20,896. Debt service, $41,514. And textbooks expenses through October were $9,874 for a total year-to-date expenditures of $4,524,301. Looking to the right, it's around 3% higher this year than we were last year at this time in the expenditure end. If you look at the individual ones, the employee benefits there is a little higher. Contractual expenses and BOCES are a little bit higher than they were last year. Materials and supplies, those are the areas that were higher.
Would that even out? Sorry, would that even out?
Yeah,
Or
eventually.
is there- there's something that made it
I think the BOCES, that BOCES one is, we had more BOCES expenses, budgeted this year than we did last year, so
Okay.
that's part of it. The benefits, right off the top of my head, I know a little bit of it, that is the additional cost in health insurance, but that's not total amount there, but right off the top of my head, I don't know exactly what that big difference would be.
When will the salaries hit with the new contract?
Let's see, I'm trying to think, probably, we're still working, well, for this year, yeah, they should start in the next pay period.
And then there'll be a back.
Yeah, it's gonna be retroactive back to the beginning of the year.
Right.
And there will be higher paychecks now from now until the end of the year.
Where will we get you'll have to do a transfer?
Yeah, well, eventually we will, because we budgeted 2.5 and it ended up 3.5, so yes. I probably won't do that until we shake it up, because we did have some changes between staff, different areas of expenses, so I'll wait till we see exactly where that's flowing, and then we'll have to do some budget transfers. Yep.
Thank you.
And then the retroactive piece, they just take as one check.
No, it's gonna be included, it's
Phased in over the.
right, it's based in for the rest of the fiscal year, school year.
Any other questions? We have a treasurer's report. Are there any questions on the treasurer's report? I'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, I was going to talk about two things. One is I'll start the ball rolling on school funding with all of my anxieties about that, and then talk about some school events and activities coming up. First, the anxieties. I think we do have some worries about school funding looking ahead towards next year. So when we're talking about you're approving the budget calendar, I believe, tonight, or maybe approving the budget calendar tonight. So I think it's appropriate for us to start thinking along these lines. The Educational Conference Board every year puts out a report. Theirs came out yesterday. They're advocating for $2 billion of additional state aid for schools for next year. It's $2 billion on top of what is being spent this year. They say that $1.5 billion is what's needed just to maintain present programs. The extra $500 million to make some improvements in big areas like English language learners, statewide, those kinds of things. And that's not terribly different than last year. What is different than last year is that we're already looking at a number of threats to the availability of funds statewide that I think calls to question whether or not that kind of projection isn't perhaps overly optimistic in terms of what we're looking at. We don't really know, but this is pretty much what we're hearing. So, for example, from the comptroller's office, the comptroller has identified a triple threat of fiscal risks that we are facing, and talking about the deficit that exists this year of $4 billion, but also looking ahead to next year, seeing that double to about $8 billion, and then recognizing that somewhere in there our state government has to balance its budget. We're also looking at the teacher retirement system. So cost of teacher retirement system typically go down when earnings are higher, and the teacher retirement system is going to be lowering its earnings projections, which means that our school district and every school district in the state will now be paying, next year, be paying a higher percentage of salaries towards retirement. So in round numbers, this year we're paying about 9.8% of all salaries towards, an additional 9.8% of all salaries towards teacher retirement. Next year we're looking at between 10.5% and 11%. That might translate, very round numbers, Larry might have some different ones, somewhere between probably $80,000 and $100,000 in real dollars between this year's budget and next year's budget. Then we're also looking at the impact of the federal changes to the tax law that may be coming down the road. It's obviously a big issue nationally. How might it play out on local levels? But first, if in fact we see limits to state and local property tax deductions, there's worry that voters might be soured on tax increases at all. And there may be some additional pressure to lower property tax levies. Okay, that's our guess. we're looking at potential elimination of health insurance mandates and resistance to renewing Child Health Plus. That's going to impact maybe not our budget directly, but the lives of our kids, indirectly, which means indirectly the kind of support systems that we have to put in place may be greater. We're also worried about the continued risk to Medicaid funding. I brought this up a number of times just this year. We could be looking at a hit on Medicaid funding in two different areas. One, we get direct Medicaid reimbursement, and then on the other hand, the state of New York receives Medicaid support from the federal government. If either one or both of those goes down, then we would see an impact on our money. And then, of course, the opportunity gap that I just talked about is directly connected to all of this. And so, when our kids' lives are tougher, then we see that reflected sometimes immediately, sometimes down the road in needs in school. So, the budget development process begins next month. So I'll try and keep you informed as these kinds of issues come up. We'll get recommendations from the Board of Regents, we'll get recommendations, and then we'll get the budget, the executive budget, that'll come out in January, and then finally the negotiations will start working, and then in April receive the final state aid numbers. Yes, sir.
So given what you just said, do you have a sense of what our budget needs are going to be next year? I think we probably all have a general idea. What's the worst case scenario? Everything you just said, all of it happened and it was the worst that could possibly happen. How much are we talking about a shortfall?
In the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Not in the millions. But
Not in the millions.
okay, yeah, but that's good news.
That's
So-
an optimist. Yeah.
Well, I mean, $3 million in state aid disappears, that's millions. And,
Yeah.
then that's scary. But 100,000, if it's 900,000, that's scary too. But if it's 150,000, that's
that would be good. I mean, that's
Right.
much lower.
Well, that's why I
Like
asked.
half of
Our
what we
worries are
have.
typically dual worries. So we worry about decreased funding, or sometimes it decreased funding increases. Not as much of an increase as last year, but sometimes it's decreased funding, and that's much more dramatic. But on the other hand, it's the increased cost. So the TRS that I just mentioned, teacher retirement,
Sure.
that's an increased cost.
there's
Increased cost.
100,000.
The other areas that we worry about are, of course, the biggies are salary and benefits, right? Health insurance being a big one. We worry about what's the increase going to be in health insurance. Is it going to be modest like last year, 1.5%, or is it going to be more like the state average, 5.5%? 5.5% is a tremendous number compared to 1.5%. And then we see our BOCES costs. We've had that discussion here a number of times. When those costs go up, like last year, 2, 3, 4, 5%, we can usually handle that. But if it goes up 10, 12, 14%, that's a big hit. We have other costs on things like fuel, oil. All of these costs, when we start to see those costs go up and the reimbursement go down, the tax cap stay pretty level. We're looking at, it's all a guess still, around 2% probably, because that's about where the CPI is landing, at least right now. We'll see what happens in the next couple of months. So all of that, depending on how it plays out, could make for a little different formula. But so it all comes together at the same time, then it's a big problem.
In bringing up BOCES, my concern is that they don't need our vote anymore, or support anymore for their capital projects. So, when they start talking, assuming they're starting budget talks too, I would like that concern from us to be, if people share it, to be shared with them, that we still are in a situation where we have a tax cap that we have to meet, and they need to help us do that.
On a lighter note, it is December. We've got, we're in the middle of 3 weeks leading up to the break. So there's a lot of things going on. This past Friday, the Palace Theater hosted a special screening of the movie Wonder for all of our students, grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And why was that? Because people were coming out of having read the book and seen the movie and saying, this is going to be the best anti-bullying experience that your kids are going to get. So,
We just listened to it on tape.
That's a great
It's a
movie.
great book on tape, so it was.
So anyway, our teachers want our students to see this movie together and then discuss it together, and we have had many, many rich and vibrant discussions in the schools, based on their feedback and their feelings as a reflection on the movie. This is a way for our students to focus on the issues of bullying, kindness, and acceptance. So it was a nice experience last Friday. It was pulled together at the last minute. A nice thing to pull together at the last minute. Also last weekend, our high school students and members of the drama club performed Afraid of the Dark. That was a comedy set in an old stone house with a very unusual cast of characters, and if you got to see them, you would know what I mean by unusual. Our students were really terrific in their roles, and I think we had a lot of smiling and laughing and giggling audience members as a result. So congratulations to Brendan Gotham, who directed the cast and the entire cast for their efforts in that play. We're also beginning our future planning meetings this month. As a matter of fact, we started some of the meetings today. So that means in the month to come, we'll be getting together with subject departments, grade level teams, and other programs in the schools to talk about how are we doing in those areas, what do we want to do differently in the future. And those future planning meetings always lead to an eventual future plan for each school that principals present to you sometime in the spring, usually the late spring. We're also looking forward to busy 3 weeks of holiday celebrations. We have the middle school winter concert this week, 7 p.m. That's tomorrow in the auditorium, followed by the high school winter concert next Wednesday. That's December 13th, and on December 14th is the elementary school concert, 6:30 p.m. So those 3 concerts are coming up. We have elementary movie night this Friday. That's actually a fundraiser for the after prom party. Right? We have middle school chorus performing in the village tree lighting on Saturday. We have a high school chorus hosting the Twilight Messiah on Friday. We have a Science Olympiad team gearing up for its first competition. We have the winter athletic season, which is in full swing, going strong. And then we have planning underway for traditional senior dinner, which will come last day before school lets out. And then Christmas break will begin after school lets out, Friday, December 22nd, 2.5 weeks from now. That's everything.
Busy time.
There any speed bumps with the hockey team? The women's team, the combined team? Unforeseen circumstances?
So
I didn't
there's
hear
some,
stuff.
I mean, there are some, they're kind of, I would say right now, kind of minor, mostly planning, organization, communication kinds of things. But I think there's a lot of positive things that maybe some smooth ice that we're also skating on right now as far as feeling good about it. So, yeah, I guess there's more to come on that.
How many girls are there?
20, maybe? That's a round number. Anyone know
There's 3
specific?
goalies.
Yeah,
Wow.
maybe it's over.
Yeah.
It's over 20. Yes, I'm right about that. Yeah, it's over 20.
A lot of girls.
Good.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Maybe my sunglasses. Information for the board. We have the Things Audit Report. Any questions? The Adirondack Health Check donation and letter. Learning from our colleagues, it's the Clinton, Essex, Warren, Washington School Board Association program for January 11th. If anyone's interested in attending, Karen will register you. Just let her know.
Karen, can you register? Yes. Do you want steak, fish, or chicken? Chicken.
And then there's a gap donation check. Any questions on any of those things? If we go down to linking goals with the agenda items, definitely have our opportunity gap presentation and other and Connie's information that go along with education. Emergency response plan with students first and foremost. Any others?
The survey results we haven't hit yet, but that'll be on goal 3, which is community outreach. And I have no idea why I put this down. CEW learning, or the learning from our colleagues could technically go under goal
Oh,
4.
the education, yeah.
Yes. And then that takes us to the Surveymonkey results.
Surveymonkey?
Yeah, me too.
It's
So-
really a good company though.
Oh, yeah.
Just. So Patty, do you wanna lead this or?
Well, so closed the, did you close it? Joe closed somebody, we closed the survey. We got a really great response from it. I was surprised when I went back in and it was over 200 responses. And this is just the preliminary information that they provide, and it with the bar graphs. And I just was thinking that it would be nice, maybe at a January meeting or a work session, to kind of talk about, we have this that we could look over, but then we could meet again in more of a work session type format to try to take some of the feedback and apply it, to be able to present the information back to the people that gave their emails, as far as acknowledging and feedback. And we could post it. There's some information, private information that's in there that we, need to be sure that we're not sending out to everybody.
Right.
But I think it's, a lot of the comments were really good suggestions, and we could just look them over and decide what we wanna maybe take and or, offer to other areas of the school that they might be able to use.
Right, and I think some of this this might be a way to, rejuvenate the shared decision-making committee.
Right.
They have this survey and they can kind of.
Right, we
that
have
along
over 100 emails now. People provided, as far as I can tell from looking at it, they're real emails.
Emails.
So people that are interested in being contacted when we need feedback, and so.
Serving on a committee.
Right, and so that's why I'm thinking that if we, I don't think we're able to do it at this meeting, but if we take these results and then we can look them over, but then meet and then figure out what we need on the committees, and then just send out an invitation to see what people respond. All over 100 might just say, "Oh, just kidding, never mind." But
Well, I know.
there might be people that are able to, and there may be other areas, if we brainstorm in January, areas that we could look. The one thing that I saw a few times in looking it over as far as the feedback is they talked about, now I'll forget the community groups talked about having a representative. So if we get in touch with the Rotary Club or the Lions Club or the Business Association, because there's need that they may offer one representative for a meeting or something, just to bring in some feedback. And I thought that was a really good suggestion. Like, there may not be people willing to join a committee, but they might be willing to be a point person just to kind of bridge the communication for certain situations.
I do know one specific Rotary member that does want to join the committee.
Great, yeah.
Very specifically said, I want to be on the committee.
Yeah, so I think, if we, and that'll be good for us to do anyway, is sort of look, because it's kind of a halfway mark in January. We can look at where the committees are at and participation and which ones we need to add.
Right.
But I was really really pleased with the feedback from it. And there was very little, in my review of it, there was very little negative. And, you know, the negative that was there, I guess it was more frustration, which obviously if you ask 200 people to give you feedback, there's going to be people that are frustrated, and that's important for us to hear about too. So, yeah.
I agree.
it's
And I do think there's some, at least, you know, there were some comments that were just plain wrong. And
Right.
incorrect, and it would be good to, specifically the one about a board email that went out supporting the writing candidate, and that didn't happen.
Right,
You know, so somehow that's out there,
right,
and I think we need to find a way to respond to those.
Right.
To those kinds of things and kind of set the record straight.
right. Just sort of look at all the information and just kind of, you know, we can't address everything, but I think there's some themes in there that we might be able to tighten it up. But, yeah.
Yeah.
Good. But I would have really liked to do, these graphs, like the one that's up right now, you know, I think we can put that together in a attachment back to the people that provided the emails, and then be able to post it and put on Facebook and put on the page.
Put on that page, yeah.
That, but what I'd like to do is do it in January, so that along with this, then we have kind of some action items from the board as far as other things that we're gonna do with the information, just to tie it all together.
Okay.
That was just my thoughts on being able to
So we could,
close the loop on
we
it.
could set aside part of one of the January meetings.
Are there two?
Should be two. One
Yeah.
of the second and one. 2
Yeah,
weeks
so
later.
maybe if we do like just a little work session on the feedback, people can look it over and bring what points they want, and then we could fix it so that that January it could be presented, but then get that information out to people, the second one. Because then we hit budget spiral.
Okay, all right, anybody else? Comments? All right, thank you, and thanks Patty for.
And I don't know what
overseeing that.
so we did pay all the bills, so when you're reading the multiple comments
Yeah.
from Surveymonkey, their disclaimer that they're gonna get rid of all of our information. The good news is that, one, we don't need to pay for them anymore once this runs out, and we have all the data. So Joe is very familiar with Surveymonkey and was able to export all the data, and Surveymonkey offers it in multiple formats, and I think he exported it in multiple formats. So if there are other charts or pie charts or things, we can play around with it also.
I thought that one chart that was up there was the best chart.
Yeah.
Because I picked that one.
Oh, good.
I
for
said
you.
this one would be the best one. It
Yeah.
has the best information on it.
Yeah, but it's really nice because once you do it, then you can keep it. It's not like we're on a timeline now.
Yeah, right.
Now we have it all, and we can, you know, keep it and reference it and pull other data out from it at any point. It's there. So
Put together those email address.
right, and so that's the other, when we do send it out, I want to be sure that we blind CC, so that we're not sending everybody's emails, because I put that little comment in, like, we won't be spreading your emails around. So
At least that purpose.
yeah, but I was really surprised how many people offered up their emails. And I know some of the people, when I was looking at the emails, I thought, wow, good for them. That's
Well,
nice of them.
and I was really kind of surprised at the number of people who after a meeting would go out and take the time to, you know, do it online.
You're right,
You know, I just thought they'd leave the meeting and forget about it. but,
Yeah.
They didn't.
right. No, it was really, it was nice. So anyway, that's that. Sorry to
Good.
blah, blah.
Thank you, thanks. We'll move on to the action items. So, the minutes we've done, so the next one would be the 2017-18 extra duty and club stipend approvals. So the recommended action reads, upon recommendation of the superintendent, approve 2017 and 2018 extra duty advisors and stipends and clubs activities advisors on the attached list. Is there a motion to approve this action?
Rick, didn't you have?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll
But we
move
need
first.
to do
Yeah,
the motion
okay. You-
first.
okay. I'll second.
The first
Who first, you did the motion?
I'll first it.
I first.
Like, wait a minute.
And Jeff seconded it. All right, so discussion or questions?
Sure. Questions more than,
Okay.
and at first I apologize because being in on the negotiations, I should have been more familiar with this, but in lieu of all the other things.
You didn't read that page in the
This,
contract?
this sort of skipped right
Oh,
over.
Rick, this
So
is the
that's
first
one of my
time,
questions.
Karen, can you take off the voting so that we can access this, please?
Oh, I can just,
I was gonna say, this is really the first time
'Cause I
the
can't
board's
ac-
ever received this, and we thought this would be,
access the list.
kind of a
Oh,
valuable,
I see what you're
important additional piece, for you, but we actually think it's important for us also because, it sort of forces us to get our ducks in a row also, because sometimes these stipend positions, and especially the, club, and class advisors, we kind of float through part of the year without really nailing that down sometimes, and we should do better. So this is gonna help us as well as help you.
So just, I won't, questions I can ask one-on-one, I will. Now, are these the old stipends? Because, so they'll be updated with the contract, okay. When it says two positions, like class advisor, senior 2.
Yeah.
Now, is each advisor paid that amount?
So, no,
That's the total?
right?
Each one is paying that now.
We're paying them a quarter, so we're paying them 0.25 per semester.
Per semester?
Right, so we're paying each one half of that
Okay.
total
Oh, yeah,
amount,
yeah, yeah.
right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
when there's two people for,
Okay.
say, a class advisorship, that total amount is being split.
I was wondering what that in parentheses was.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
So even though there's 3
Right.
suggested positions, the in parentheses 1.67 is
Semester
a
is-
4, split by 4 because you have 4 people?
I
No.
mean,
it
okay,
would
so
be
if you were to
No,
look at,
that's
say,
three
the
people.
7th grade, that
Correct.
would be
That's
a split by 4. So
okay.
every semester, each person gets 0.125
Okay.
of the total amount. But the class advisor for grade 6, so, is a third. It's really, that would total to about a third.
But
So
there's
they're
4.
splitting it.
But you got 4 names.
But there's 4 people
There's only people there.
there. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
There are only 3 of them getting paid.
Yeah,
That's
I
right. They have
think
to
it's
split
because
with
of,
the
I
4.
think it's Mr. Bringley, because he's in both the 6th and 7th grade,
Okay.
but I think he only gets one of them. But I don't know that. But I would think it was Mr. Bringley who's the person who threw the.
We'll have to clear that one up.
If there's,
Are you writing that one down for us for one?
yes.
And all the stipends are tied to the contract?
Yes.
No, which is why we're doing this, because this is actually a contractual thing, and so
they're all,
we want to treat it the same way we treat coaches, which are in a very similar spot, in a
So-
very similar look.
So we can
to the
really,
contract.
we can decide not to approve somebody as class advisor, for example. We don't really have any choice in terms of what they're paid. That's
No,
contractual,
right,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
in the number of positions.
right.
That was a question I had.
It's in there, so.
Wait, the number of positions is in the contract too?
Yes.
For each class?
Like for theater productions, there's 2 positions.
Then like
at the
for
bottom.
6th grade advisors, there's has to be 4 or 3?
I'm trying to.
It doesn't have to be, so.
No.
We just
No,
Then we have jurisdiction over that. right?
1-1-1.
Or is that?
That's really based,
Yeah.
that came out based on practice, because before we did the middle school and had the teams, it was a person or maybe 2
Right.
people
Okay.
was the 7th grade class advisor, and they got the full stipend. But once we went to teams, it was really the teams that decided, we're all class advisors, so we need to split that.
Okay.
And then the contract and codified it.
Codified the amount though, right? Not the numbers of people.
Right.
Yeah, that there's teams instead of individuals or not on the team.
Is there any limit in the contract as to how many stipends one person can,
Yeah, that was one of my questions.
but that's something we would have control over.
We could,
Mm,
technically we could, but I mean, sometimes the multiple ones, it really goes along with their position.
Well, and often
Their
the
background.
circumstances in the situation.
But I mean, if you have some, yeah, okay, I mean, it's just trying to figure out, there's only so many hours in a day, and if somebody's doing a full-time job and 3 to 4 stipends, we're
You'll
kind
see
of
that.
pushing their
So
limits.
you'll see that with, for example, elementary school club advisors. And there's sort of an unstated implicit agreement there that when a teacher is advising a club after school, they're not doing the rest of their job, and therefore they're doing that at another time. But they're actually doing that during the day if that's when the kids are there. So you see this kind of thing, but yeah,
Right,
right. So
right, with if it's just
Yeah.
one, I'm just
We're not
saying
trying
that if
to
they're
count the
4,
hours of the workday, I guess is my point. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But if you're asking somebody to work a full-time job, and then you have 4 additional
Well,
things.
Well, like
Yeah, but
music
some-
would be an example.
Well, but some of these activities aren't year-round. I mean,
Right.
some of them are like coaching, so a coach gets a stipend for coaching soccer, and then that same coach may also coach during the winter season.
Right.
They get a different stipend. That's the way with some of these. I mean, music theater companies, for example, I was pointing out that one. It just happens during that 8 weeks that the music theater is in production. So some other responsibilities that she might have would be someplace else, another time of the year.
So the music people are usually also included in this list as an additional stipend for the hours that they put in addition to the regular school day, the parades and the concerts and the events and the performances here and in other places. So.
This is kind of a personal thing, but what's up with Jack is in jazz band and he's been going to practice at 6:30 in the morning? Is that normal?
It's not unusual for jazz bands.
Okay.
Um,
I think like 11 o'clock at
It's
night
a
would be more
ratio.
normal for jazz bands. You know, but, anyway, okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
For my children, it's three mornings a week at 7 a.m.
7,
I
okay.
guess they get an extra half hour.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's basically whenever. They were doing it 7 o'clock at night for a while.
Yeah.
And they weren't having a lot of success getting the kids there.
Okay.
So they try different times for different kids in different situations. We've done that also with the women's ensemble, where they have sometimes rehearsed on weekends, sometimes rehearsed at 6 a.m.
Right.
I don't know where, frankly, I don't know when they're rehearsing right now.
Yeah.
They alter it depending on the circumstances.
I just didn't know the school was open.
We got the key.
Okay. Very good.
Under the murder mystery, it says no mystery this year.
Yeah.
Sort of obvious that there wouldn't be a stipend, but if it's in the contract that the person, just,
So we wouldn't be paying that stipend as long as we've done murder mystery. So this is the list, but actually we approve when we so principals approve the job having been done,
okay.
and that's how we actually go through the process of paying people for their work.
And one other question down at the bottom, theater production, it's 2 positions, and there's only 1 person listed,
I think it's 2 productions.
2 so per production.
Do you know that one, Leonard?
I don't, right off the top of my head.
But, yeah, because he would,
Well, there's 2 positions listed there, and Brendan's the only one.
Right,
But
But
there's a
if
middle
there's-
school
there's
play
a
and a
middle school
and a
play
high
and
school.
a
Right.
high school play.
so does he get 1 for each, yeah.
And I want to clarify up on the 6th and 7th grade. I think what happened is that 3, it was when science science was taught by the 3 teachers, and then they moved Mr. Brennan down. And I think that you just can't read the other names, but all 4 teachers for each grader in that, like I couldn't open it up, so I don't have it on my.
It's just that 7th grade, it says it's .125 per semester in grade, and there's 4
I just think what happened is it just never got updated, so I think it needs to just be updated
Okay.
for what it is.
Okay.
That's all.
All right.
She started it.
So you can see it's complicated in general, and that's what I meant when I said it helps us get our ducks in a row. That there are these, these little details that, can be overlooked if we don't get the ball rolling.
Thank you.
This has actually helped us. I would say immensely. Would you say, Karen? As far as pulling all this stuff together over the last month? Yeah.
Any other questions? I think we're ready to vote. It's not coming up on mine. Oh, there it is.
Because you have a MacBook, it's,
Oh, I came up
All right, motion carries 6-4-0. Next is the resolution to adopt this LPEA contract. So the proposed resolution reads, be it resolved that the board hereby ratifies the negotiated agreement between the district and the Lake Placid Education Association, NYSUT, AFT, AFL-CIO, and authorizes the funding of those monies necessary to implement the provisions of the 2017 through 2020 collective bargaining agreement. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
oh,
Thanks, Rick. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Joan. Is there discussion?
I'm gonna recuse myself from this.
Thank you. There are no questions, and please vote. So the motion carries 5-4, 0 against, with 1 recusal. Okay.
Can I ask something just before we get into the next, because then I always forget?
Mhm.
Sorry about that. The opportunity gap presentation, the slideshow that you did and the information is under administrative. Now that we've had it presented, can it move up so that it'll be available?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, sorry, I meant to ask that.
It'd be available as a link when we put it into the goals, right?
Yeah, but only if we move it.
Okay. Oh, right.
Like,
Okay.
we would be able to tell it's
Right.
there, but
But
if someone
nobody
else
else
is
can.
looking, and I just
Gotcha.
think that is important to, that's all.
Okay, good. Next is the emergency response plan. The proposed action reads, upon recommendation of the superintendent, approve the attached emergency response plans for the district, elementary school, and middle and high school. Is there a motion to approve these plans?
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Dan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Jeff. Is there discussion, questions?
Yes. Can you take that down, Karen?
She did.
Yes.
Oh, there it goes. On the elementary, flip chart, you said the schools are doing it different. In the elementary flip charts, I just, the weapons page.
Yeah.
Has those guns at the base of it.
Yeah, it's all for quick access.
Yeah,
It's a teacher document, it's not a kid document.
okay.
Yeah.
I just, look for that.
Yeah. So the flip chart is a range where you can get to any page and just like go to it and turn it up. Like
Yeah,
that.
I like that. I like that better than
And that's
the
why
card.
it's there, so they can,
Yeah.
many
Right.
different visual cues to go for it.
Okay,
And plus, they hadn't really done that as much as the middle high school, right? As far as having like a one go-to document before. And this is
Right, this is their go-to document.
Yeah, it's
you know,
really good.
And they developed it themselves
Yeah.
because they really wanted something that would work for them.
yeah, I just didn't know if there's another symbol here for the gun on the school document. Actually, I don't think we're supposed to have guns on school documents according to our policy, so I don't know if there's another symbol or something, but anyway, it's, But my other question is it talks about, it has a thing in the wording within the elementary one that it says consider the age, but it doesn't say anything else.
In what section are you talking about?
I forgot to put the page on it. I just wondered, I'll be able to find it. It was in the building that.
Okay, so you're talking about in the weapons area. And so in an elementary school, there's a big difference between a fifth grader who might have access to a, let's just say some kind of knife-like weapon, and a kindergartner, and their reasoning and intent. And so what they're trying to recognize there is that we're going to respond a little bit differently. In other words, they're not going to see, I'm just going to use an example, I hope I get it right, a kindergartner who put something in their backpack that they took out of their dad's glove compartment, let's just say, and put it in their backpack. They're not going to see that as a potential, this child must be, they might not see that in terms of this child must be planning an attack on somebody tomorrow or something like that, in the same way that we might with a sixth grader or a ninth grader or a 12th grader, you know what I'm saying? That they're considering the age in terms of what might be the context of this situation.
So throughout the things, I'm a little, there's so many should considers throughout this that I just wouldn't want it. I think there's certain safety steps, and loaded weapon is one of them, that needs to be addressed first before you're considering the age. So, because a 5-year-old can take a loaded weapon out of their father's glove compartment, come into school, and they may or may not be more dangerous than a fifth grader because they don't even understand the difference. So that when I'm seeing those throughout throughout all the plans, I just think in certain situations there need to be really basic steps like CPR, that if this is the situation, you do this and this and this, and then you can look at all the considerations and how you handle it from that point on. But I think there's certain safety things that I wouldn't really want people, I wouldn't want the step to be to think about the age and or social situation or IQ of this child if there's a situation, again, with a loaded gun, that throughout this just had me, I guess was just a bit of a red flag with it.
I understand that. I understand that there could be a level of discomfort with that. But a lot of this is what, we spent a number of years working with the experts on this. We're not, we don't make this stuff up. And what the experts say, and we have relied heavily on the state police, what the experts say is that you can't in advance always know precisely what to do because the circumstances might change. And that obviously that can be an uncomfortable thing. The more experienced we are, the more we review things, the more we talk about them the way we've been doing, the better prepared we are for them. But this is our liaison, word for word. Every situation is different, and we have to be ready for that. He said, for example, what we say we do is there's a threat, you go into a lockdown. He said, however, there's a however, I like that one, right? Here's a however. He said, actually you have 3 choices, and sometimes the other 2 are the better choices, right? Because the lockdown is the hide choice. He said, but sometimes there's the runaway choice, and sometimes there's the fight choice. He said, and I cannot tell you 100% that there may not be a time when you need to access the runaway or the fight. That doesn't make people comfortable, but that's recognizing the reality of these circumstances.
Yeah, and I think the difference between that and say a heart attack is those other two choices typically don't happen with that. You address it, and then there's a certain set of parameters that you use to address it. There may be variability within that, but I think in this situation, because, and I thought the same thing going into these meetings, but after talking to these guys, they're so fluid, these situations, that it almost has to come down to the training. Excuse me, the training of the people, like the leads, and making their best decisions under the circumstances. And that, I think that's kind of reflected in these plans now, saying you should consider these things, but you can't get out a flip chart and go, okay.
Right. We're getting as close as we can to
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
of course,
I mean,
which is why we have the flip chart,
right.
why we have we have people, we're practicing these responses, right? And so, last Thursday we practiced a number of responses. And so people don't always get it right the first time, right? So then we're correcting them, and we're doing it right the second time, and so we're getting people in the habit of going through these steps. But as we were talking about, you were involved in the conversation in the elementary school. What if the fire is in the wrong spot?
Yeah.
You can't go that way.
Mm-hmm.
You have to adjust. You have to respond. But the fact of bringing that up and talking about that, I think, helps us recognize that we may need to change our response based on the circumstance. And that was part of that whole thing. What do you do when the fire's in the hallway and that's your exit route? Well, you don't go that way, right? You go a different way.
And then the other question I had, and I thought I put the page number down, but I didn't. So the weapons on campus, the step one, the shelter in place, and then there was a conversation when we had the meeting about the terminology. And so I don't know if anybody knows what page the card is on, that the
For the high school.
The high school, the middle high school.
It's way towards the back.
Because the card doesn't have shelter in place on it, unless the card is two-sided, and we only got one side in this. And it doesn't have, let me find it. So that was talked about when I remember Teresa Lindsay specifically talking about it, and that was one of the things that was going to get the new terminology was going to get sorted out for the revision of this plan, and I just didn't see it.
I think we did.
Yeah, I guess it's almost the very end.
You're talking about the hold in place, shelter in place, and
yeah.
the weather
So-
shelter in place. Yeah.
So there's no shelter in place on this card. It only has shelter alternate location on the card.
So on the card,
Yeah,
on the upper right-hand box, shelter in place, alternate location. Right, so that's one form of shelter in place, right?
Right.
You go to an alternate location.
right.
The hold in place, so we're trying to distinguish. What we had was one kind of, this was a year ago or 2 years ago, we had one response called shelter in place. But we recognize, and actually it was us recognizing, this is the community of safety people recognizing, that there's actually multiple ways to respond, not just one kind of shelter in place, that there was a shelter in place when there was a tornado coming, and there's a shelter in place, we were calling a shelter in place when we were waiting for the drug dogs to come in the building. So we actually changed the name, so we have shelter in place, alternate location, and we have hold in place. And that hold in place is holding kids in classrooms so that they're not interfering or interrupting what's going on out in the hallways. Versus the shelter in place, which is we're going to take everybody to the auditorium, we're going to take everybody to the gymnasium, because that's the safest place for us right now. Because there's a bomb threat that somebody put a bomb in the, I was going to say the third floor home ec room. So we're going to do a shelter in place and gymnasium, and then decide how to respond there. We'll give more instructions there. That's what the two right-hand sides are.
Right, it just, those aren't reflected on the steps.
I do think there's another side.
Is
steps.
it weapons on campus? Is that the card? It says if weapons, following it, and it's initiate shelter-in-place procedure.
But I know that, but there's not a shelter-in-place procedure on this card.
Okay.
So if somebody's trying to do the, I just,
So it's shelter in place alternate, let me just clarify. Shelter in place alternate location. The entire school population is moved to the auditorium or gymnasium. Steps to implement. 1, alternate location shelter in place announcement is given. Staff and students proceed to the designated shelter in place area. Take attendance and forward to principal or designee. Shelter in place is lifted when notified by emergency responder. Is that what you're talking about, or you're talking about different?
She's saying there's no shelter-in-place card or little box. You have a shelter-in-place alternate location, but where's the shelter-in-place?
So if under weapons, if the shelter-in-place is gonna be initiated. So that's what step 1 is, but there's no step 1. So then it's left up to people to know that hold in place is the same as shelter in place, unless you're sheltering in an alternate location. I don't think that's clear, and I think this is too important not to be clear. And I don't know if it's in other spots, because I was getting a bit cross-eyed. There's a lot of pages to this, so I don't know if in hurricane, under the hurricane, if it says initiate shelter in place. I just think shelter in place need on the card that the teachers have in the classroom. I think that needs to be, you know, if it says shelter in place and then there are 2 arrows and they're going to get announcements over the PA system to differentiate the choices, but I just think somehow that needs to be clear. And it was brought up, you know, it was brought up when we had the discussion asking about the shelter in place, and then that's when Teresa Lindsay had said there's been changes in the terminology. It's really a hold in place.
So what she meant was that there's a difference between a shelter in place and a hold in place. We used to call them both shelter in place. Now we're calling one shelter in place, and then there's been a sort of clarification, shelter in place, alternate location, but that's still shelter in place. So there
There are
isn't
2
another shelter in place,
shelter-in-places.
that's what you're thinking.
I don't know.
Yeah, that'll
There
be
are
the
2
one.
shelter in places.
So there's shelter in place and hold in place.
There's shelter in place alternate location, and a hold in place.
No, the shelter in place alternate location, which is,
So
Yeah.
if under weapons it says the shelter in place is gonna be initiated, then does that mean automatically that it's a shelter in place alternate location?
I think just the opposite.
no, I think it's hold in place. That's what it is. It's
I
hold in
just-
place,
I
that's what
just
it is.
feel
So
like
the
that
reason
should
why
be-
is, but the reason why is, yeah, no, you're right. It's hold in place, and the reason why is that we've never made changes to those pages, basically, since we changed the terminology from to shelter.
So I
to
think
hold.
now is the time to make the changes to those pages, if we're gonna be, because that was talked about, if we're gonna, I mean, if all this is being done to these plans, and I know everybody's looked at them 100 times and they're sick of looking at them, but I just really feel like if the terminology changed in step 1 for the weapons is to hold in place until you figure out the other steps. I don't know what the terminology is, I just know it's not matching the cards that the teachers have in the room.
That would be clear, you know, and I looked at the tornado. The tornado
Oh, thank
says,
you.
move students and staff inside building and initiate shelter-in-place procedure with instructions to go into the hallway or an internal.
So that would be
room. So
clear.
That's clear than the one that for the weapons, which just says shelter-in-place.
Yeah, it should say hold
Hold
in
in
place.
place,
Yeah.
So it needs to be clarified in the document.
On those cards, yeah.
what-
And I
That
could
Karen
see, I
will
mean, I
change
know
that
that
to-
was part of the
We'll change that to hold in
conversation.
place.
I know that that was part of the conversation, that they said that in a weapons, that they may do a hold in place and then determine, because of the location where the person is, if it was an active situation, that they would then do a shelter in place alternate location to remove students from the nearby area. Like, all those were conversations that were had, I just couldn't,
Or a
Find it in
lockdown,
here,
you know,
or
or
the
a
lockdown.
which is.
Yeah.
For an immediate threat.
Right.
yeah, for the, that then it would go to those other steps, which, but I really think, and not to dwell on, you know, 1, 2, 3, maybe C, but I just think that was an area that there seemed to be some gray area, and I just think if we're looking at this and making changes, that we should make sure that that the flip chart matches, you know, with the elementary, like, the worded document and the flip chart match up, and that the cards that they use at the middle high school match to the steps that would be found. That's what I'm asking.
So should we hold off on voting on this tonight and revisit it one more time?
It's up to you guys. We can make the changes regardless.
Okay, well,
I think they can make the changes and
Right.
and approve something with that
Sure.
stipulation. We've done that in the past.
I'm fine with that.
It does say shelter in place procedure. If weapon is discovered on campus, initiate shelter in place procedure, so that,
And it would be.
I know,
Hold
but
it
the
there.
shelter in place description isn't on the card. So either add
It would be
shelter in
hold in
place,
hold in place is,
so either change the wording or add it to
so
the card.
so that can be.
We already wrote that down. So. Did you see any others like that? Any other situations that were clear or didn't
I
match?
think there was something, and I thought I referenced with the little note thing. I don't know if anybody has anything they want to try and, like decipher what I thought was so clear when I was putting it in here, but, it's with the page number, yeah, I guess that was my, thing, is that I just, if we're,
So we can make that change, essentially immediately.
Uh,
Right? Yeah, you have the original.
So we
document,
would
right?
be approving this with the stipulation that the shelter in place would be changed to,
Sure.
to hold in place.
Yeah, I think it's, clear that these documents can be amended any time, that if there's something that's not clear, we can clarify it. If there's something that changes in the law, we can modify the documents to reflect that. It's not like,
Yeah, I
once
just-
we approve it, doesn't mean it's cast in stone for the next.
They're all in the
Just-
documents, yeah.
I would be more comfortable, but if everyone else is comfortable, they can choose to do that. I would be more comfortable in having it be corrected. But that's just, it's fine, I'm sure it'll be,
I'll leave that up to
I can't
the rest
find-
of you. Do they want to approve it tonight, or do you want to postpone the vote until the next meeting?
I'm good at approving it tonight. Either way is fine, but I think it's pretty clear in my mind that it's a living document that would be modified as necessary. There's a legal aspect to this too, or a requirement by the state that this has to be in place, approved by the board by a certain date. That might represent it.
Well,
Well, the way
we've seen some of
the way we interpret it.
contradictions in those dates.
True, but
Yeah.
the way we are interpreting it.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I'm fine doing it tonight.
I'm fine, as long as it's contingent upon that change.
But I'm also fine if you really feel like you want to wait. I'm fine with that.
So I put the new motion out there, I used the old motion, and then comma with amended changes discussed.
Okay.
So we have to do a first and a second
Yeah.
again, and then vote.
So, Dan, are you willing to still make the motion as
Yeah,
amended?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? Jeff,
I'll still second that
thank you.
as amended.
There are no questions, and let's please vote. And the motion carries 5-4, one opposed. Next item is the donation acceptance. The proposed action reads, whereas Lake Placid Central Schools Board of Education policy number 6255, donations, gifts, and grants to the district allows for the superintendent of schools to accept on behalf of the board gifts, donation, and grants having a value of less than $1,500. Whereas monies have been granted in the amount of $4,000 from First as the recipient of the 2018 Argosy Foundation RFC Rookie Grant. Now therefore be it resolved in accordance with policy 6255, the Board of Education hereby accepts the grant from First in the amount of $4,000 as the recipient of the 2018 Argosy Foundation FRC Rookie Grant. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
yes.
Is there a second?
Yes.
Who said yes?
Joan.
Joan, thank you.
Joan in her
Voice is
very
gone.
quiet voice.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to pull it out so that it acknowledged, so it wasn't lumped into the other,
Okay.
because they're two significant amounts. And then, are they the same? They both say Lego, so I wasn't
Yeah.
quite clear on that, and that was my other question.
Yeah, this isn't the simplest grant, right? So,
Good. I had no idea what it's like. I read it twice. I'm like,
so this is financing the equipment and hopefully some of the additional funding that we'll need to get our robotics team going, right? Here's how it works. This is called the First Robotics Group. There's also a NASA grant that we applied for. But, sorry, we've been working on this one, trying to understand this one. We didn't actually receive it. What we did receive is a $6,000 grant, $4,000 this year, $2,000 next year. But then the NASA part of that grant would replace the $2,000. How'd that sound? Clear as mud?
So is that why we're not, because the Lego grant of $6,000 isn't in this
It's all
resolution, so
part
it's hard to
connected,
connect
right? So
together.
this
Okay.
is
So
all,
it is
it's all
connected.
comes, yeah, so it's all
Okay.
coming as like a complete systems that has all these pieces in place, including the Lego stuff. And
Okay.
I haven't seen a lot of this. Actually, I haven't seen any of this. So, so we're going up based on their award letter that we'll be receiving this.
so somebody writing a check for this amount, or are they sending us stuff?
We do not have a
Yes.
check. Yes.
Okay, that I couldn't tell.
So does that amount need to be changed then from 4,000 to 6, or is 4,000 correct?
So 4,000 is this year,
Right, okay,
right? So it's 6.
Right.
4,000 this year, 2,000 next year.
okay.
So next
next
year,
year
there'll
we-
be there'll be like a follow-up to this that will be 2,000, in hope that everything goes as it's
Yes.
supposed to.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I didn't,
And in case, but unless we get the second grant, then that would replace the part of the first grant.
Twice removed.
So it could be different. Could be
but we're not
different.
getting $10,000 today.
Not today.
All right.
In what form are we getting it? I guess is my question. I'm going to grant you this $10,000 pen
We're gonna
because I'm
get,
assigning the value to it. No, I don't know what are we getting?
4,000.
Are we getting but are we getting $4,000? Are we getting $4,000 worth of robotics
Stuff.
equipment? Or a mixture of the two, or
So when they applied for the
couldn't
grant, did
tease
they
that out
have
of the
to list what they needed? I guess it's part
I
of
think it's great. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah,
I'm all
I know.
for it,
I
I
think
don't
it's
need
great,
to,
too.
I don't need to pull
We
it
need
out
to
to
take
say
a
that
growth
I
on March
allocate the
there.
money, I just
Yeah.
would like to, one, acknowledge it, because it's great.
Sure.
But two, to know what I'm acknowledging.
So the letter says
So-
using a coupon code. to
Yeah, so I think a lot of this
Right.
is,
They
That's
go
what
in
my
and
headset
buy
was.
it,
yeah, is the purchasing.
like a gift card,
And, yeah.
okay.
Okay. Good analogy.
Christmas, can
Got
you
it.
tell him on Christmas,
Yeah.
Will? Would you like a gift card?
I like them.
Any other questions? Let's vote.
I feel like, oh man.
Gift card.
Move forward, this is getting long.
Okay, sorry.
So we're gonna vote.
Sure.
Sure. We'll take it.
No, for
I didn't mean to belabor that point, but I still understood.
And motion carries 6-4-0. Special education, we approved with the consent agenda, but are there any questions on the next packet? No? Okay, then we will move to executive session. Is there a motion to enter executive session for the purposes of discussing the appointment of certain personnel?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Dan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Joe.
Wow.
Well,
Spoke right up.
I was jumping out of my seat there for a minute.
All right.
Why, Rick?
Aye, did everybody vote?
I voted for everybody.
Okay, thank you. 6-4-0 against, and it's 8:45.
Issue value.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye-bye, good night, guys.
Thank you.
my green extension cord is on, so I can plug right
It's
into
really odd.
that. I got that at the dollar store.
It looks, it looks.
You put it on the ballot?
Christmas stuff.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, well then.
So we're about that.
So that's what I was
Do you
wondering.
want
do we
me to
need
stay?
Is there, I don't know which ones are actually
I hope this is
$1.
bad.
No, it's all $1.
No, it's $1 to each, and just to clarify.